Hello and welcome to one of the first festive editions of our podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Andy.
And I'm one of your other hosts, Scott. Welcome to Tea and Timbits.
Global perspectives on business development to help you prosper. Well, today, actually, we're going to talk about something that is inspired from the season because as Santa starts to plan his travels around the world, we
I was like, where are you going with this?
International expansion. So international expansion is our goal today. Yeah.
Is this expanding your waistline or your business?
Well, a little bit of both, maybe.
All right.
But Scott, before we get into that seasonal topic there, have you any stories to share from your week?
I do. Thanks for asking, Andy. Really appreciate that. This was top of mind because it came up in a couple of different situations and they were unique in my week. And it has to do with accountability. And I'll start by saying that in my business history, this is something that I've had some business coaching around, and it has helped with in interpersonal relationships within the business, within client relationships. And it is something that when it was introduced to me, I thought, why do I need to be told about how to be accountable? I'm an accountable person. So it was, but after I went through it, I was like, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And then I saw the same kind of traps or the same sort of, I won't call them, faults or mistakes, but there's these moments where a little bit more structure in an accountability moment can really help. And so to set it up a little bit more clearly, we had a couple of situations where our team was engaging with a client and then frustrated that the client deliverable didn't come through on time. And of course, whenever this happens, it's never supposed to impact the timeline or the budget or anything like that. And we're supposed to dance and figure out how to just deal with the fact that this hasn't come through. And there was a lot of frustration and lamenting. And I said, well, we're in that situation now. So yeah, you're going to have to kind of figure it out. But next time, you've got to remember that when and this is where the coaching and learning that I've had in the past came forward again, is when you are asking another person to commit something to you, it is okay to explore how that is going to happen, to make sure that promise is going to come true. And it does not mean that by just sort of exploring that a little bit further, that you don't trust the other person, that you don't find them accountable. It just means that you are giving yourself a little bit more of a framework to work within to make sure that you're both responsible for the promise coming true. So, don't just ask them, will you do this, but will you do this by this date? Is there anything that I can do to help to help you with that task, to make sure that it comes true? Are there any other things that I can take off your plate? You don't have to necessarily say it in a way that assumes the person isn't going to get it done, but there's lots you can do to say, is there a draft I can check on then 2 days prior or things like that? There's a little bit more that you can do rather than just sort of, moving on once somebody says, oh yeah, okay, I'll get it to you on Friday or whatever.
No. It's a good learning, and I think you're completely right. It's about that mutual accountability, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's a good thing to remember, and that as the asker, as the person who needs that thing, it's okay to just give the whole situation a little bit more confidence and certainty.
I'm hearing that there may be a rather painful story behind this learning this week.
Yeah, it wasn't anything dramatic at all, but it was like, there was just a couple of moments of frustration, and could have been avoided if, one, we knew that the delivery wasn't going to happen by asking the right questions at the right time, or just put a little bit more structure around ensuring that it was going to happen.
Yeah. Very good point. Very good lesson. Thank you very much. And I think that leads us quite nicely into the topic where we, first of all, must be clear the desired outcome of today's topic of international expansion is not necessarily to convince people to look into international expansion, but to consider if it's right for their business. And if it is right for their business, how do they do it in the best way?
I think it is something that a lot of businesses just don't think about, or they naturally end up, they circumstantially end up doing. And so I would just challenge everybody that's listening. If you're already in an international market, how do you get intentional about it? If you've never thought about it, is it worth a bit of your time to consider it? Or is there if you're already in an international market, is there another one you can consider?
Yeah, I mean, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges for companies as they're looking to to expand their business into other markets? And it can be, I think for Canadian businesses, expanding into the US is it's quite a common thing to do, but it's still an international market. It's still an international expansion, and I think as well in Europe, we're quite close to each other geographically, but but culturally, there's quite a challenge in doing that expansion work. And what do you see as some of the challenges from your business?
I mean, I think you make a good point there. So in Canada, it's very natural to, at some point, enter into the American market. It is, by comparison, enormous. And it's a big opportunity for every Canadian business. So and naturally, that's where I say, like, circumstances will probably take you there at some point. And I think that the assumption is that it's just going to be the same. And I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, as many differences as there are. Obviously, there's a lot of similarities between Canadian business and Canadian culture and that of our southern neighbors as well. And we have got a well-established footprint ourselves in the U.S. I'm surprised at the extent of the cultural differences once you start engaging in a more sincere way. And I think that is, and it's one thing I've seen with other clients and other businesses, but I think that that there's a lack of true appreciation for the cultural differences that are going to exist even with your closest neighbors. And what I don't know, in my mind, the landscape in Europe, the tapestry of cultures in Europe is far more diverse and spread around. But is that similar to the Canadian experience, or not so much?
No, it is very similar. I think in many ways we often expect an international expansion from a European perspective to be, something that we can just replicate in another country, because, well, people are buying our product, so they must buy it in that country too. But the way that people buy, the way that people think, the way that people do business does vary quite significantly. I mean, in the US, it's, as you say, a huge market, and you just look from state to state, the cultures are quite different as well.
That's true.
So looking at it as a blanket international area, it's very different. I mean, if you're going to do business in New York or you're going to do business in Los Angeles, you're going to do business very differently. And the same if you're doing it in Miami or Seattle. It may be close, it may be similar in terms of language, but
we
different.
Yeah, and we have a client that we supported who did a launch of their service and product into the United States, and literally said that, like, they actually had 52 expansion projects, not just one. But they were going all in. They were doing regulatory stuff, and there was a whole different legal landscape to contend with. But that's kind of a whole other level.
Yeah, but this is one of the advantages I think we have in Europe is most countries speak different languages, and so you kind of get a clue straight away that there's going to be a different culture. Whereas in the US, everyone speaks English, so you just feel far too comfortable with it, and you just go, oh yeah, I'm familiar with that market, I'm familiar with these people, I'm familiar with the way that they do business because they're like me, but they're not. They are different, and it's the same. You and I speak
so
quite often,
like
but we have some different cultural challenges as well, I think, when we do business.
True. Yeah, absolutely. What would you say are sort of the lessons learned or the characteristics to to promote when you're moving into a new international market?
Well, I think actually, funnily enough, is actually embracing those differences and addressing them up front, and acknowledging that they exist. Because if you're a Canadian company trying to do business in Florida, say,
yeah,
there is a big cultural difference between Canada and Florida.
Well, so Andy, what you don't know is that Canadians consider Florida our 11th province.
Okay, interesting. Why is that? Tell me.
If you're a retiree, it is very common to spend the winter and avoid the Canadian winter and go down to Florida. I have several people in my extended family that own properties in Florida because they are going to escape Canada. So anyway, didn't mean to pick on that one, but actually Florida is just, it's got its cultural differences. Let's not ignore that part. But yes, I take your point.
But it's actually a good example though, because, yes, there are some glaringly obvious cultural differences, but there are also some similarities and some reasons to be attracted with those different cultures. And so embracing those things, those little quirky things actually help to soften that expansion, help to open those doors and help to get you in there. And you've got to find those little similarities, those things that allow your culture and your thing, your business not to be broken down and transformed into something completely unlike what it started out as.
Do you think
to adopt some of those local cultural differences?
Do you think that the pandemic has changed this landscape?
To some extent, perhaps it may have done. I think people are more willing to accept things from other places and other cultures because we've moved more online than we were before.
I mean, that was a leading question, but I mean, I found that you used to get resistance and friction from people who are like, well, I think maybe we'll end up, we'll go with the local company, they're right down the street kind of thing, and that's all but disappeared, at least in our world.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think still in in the industries that I work in, which are a bit more traditional industries such as maritime and energy industries, that you're not going to hire people from different parts of the world to come and work on your ship or on your wind farm or
right.
So you are still looking for those local skills and local cultures. But if it's knowledge, so for example, if it's a company from the UK and they see an opportunity in the developing offshore wind industry in the US, they will be bringing knowledge and skills to that market, but they'll still become part of that local market, and they'll still have to embrace a lot of the local cultures and a lot of the local ways of doing things, and they'll need to work with local people and to build that up.
Right.
And so those companies that are developing those wind farms will look for local companies with international knowledge to support them.
Right.
And so the international expansion side of things is something that is it is important to maintain these relationships with the origin, but also to embrace the local cultures and the local way of doing things.
Because I think you will still find that there'll be some people who are just they want to stay local, and that's fine. Let them do that. It's not an opportunity worth pursuing. But for others, where there's a little bit more of a open posture and there's a consideration there. Yeah, why not lean in? It can be a little bit tricky from a bookkeeping. I talked about sort of, legal structures are different in all these different jurisdictions. So don't bite off more than you can chew. And don't forget to talk to a few people who have done it before. Double check that there isn't some regulatory requirement. I mean, I know even over here, we are constantly needing to consider, European privacy regulations and GDPR and things like that from a digital perspective. So the world is getting smaller, but at the same time, there are very specific nuances to the, regulatory environment in these different jurisdictions. I think that's an obvious consideration, but I've also seen people just sort of nonchalantly wander in, send an invoice, and later kind of get stuck up.
No, that's right. And I think it's important that something that you and I have worked with previously, Scott, is the chambers of commerce and boards of trade and stuff
Yes.
in looking at these international expansions, and they are very well set up for helping companies.
There's all kinds of resources that want you to do this, especially in your local market, right?
Correct.
I mean,
Correct,
in the Canadian market in particular, a lot of our GDP and our business comes from foreign markets. We're a smaller economy, and we need those international funding sources in order to, grow and prosper. And so there'll be resources here in our local market that will support our expansion into these international markets. So don't forget to look for that wherever you are. Don't look for it in your target market. Look for it in your domestic market, because they want you to be collecting more revenue, paying more taxes, hiring more people, and they'll want to see that expansion happen.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I think circling back to the goal with this episode was really just to discuss whether or not it was something that is going to be relevant for your business. And if it is, then what are the best ways?
Yeah, maybe we've got one person going, you know what, I never really thought of that quite the way that I have before, and I'll put some time aside to give it some more thought. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, continue enjoying your multiple Christmas events now as we continue into the season, and look forward to speaking to you next week, Scott.
All right. And if anybody wants to find us and chat further, teaandtimbits.com is the best place to track us down. We hope to see you there, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, everybody.